Welcome to Agents Growth Academy, folks. Class is in session. Today, I am excited to share with you someone I just met, Bryan Fulchek, and he is going to talk about embracing the opportunity in disruption in the future of insurance. Let me tell you a little bit about Bryan. Bryan is the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners, which advises insurers and others in the industry on how to navigate the changes and disruption we all face. Bryan spent 20 years, just like me, in insurance, including serving as head of claims for Hiscox USA and leading growth for the insurtech Hi Marley. He has also held leadership roles at carriers like Liberty Mutual and Beasley and was a consultant in McKinsey & Company's insurance practice. Bryan is a best-selling author and public speaker, including several TEDx talks. His best-selling book series, The Future of Insurance, From Disruption to Evolution, shares case studies of legacy and startup carriers overcoming the barriers to change we face in the industry to innovate and evolve. Not only that, Bryan is just a wicked awesome person because he's from New England. So Bryan, welcome to the show, man. What's going on?
Thank you for having me. I feel like I should amp up my Boston accent now.
I'll tone mine down.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Wicked awesome to have you here.
Yes.
Yeah, man. No, super excited. Why not for our guests? Why don't you kind of bring us up to speed on how you got here today?
Yeah. Well, you listed like there's a long circuitous kind of path, and I think like a lot of folks, I got into the industry by accident, but I did, and pretty quickly actually kind of found out I love it. This is an industry that has so much opportunity to do better, to make change, to improve the way we work, and that's kind of how I'm wired. I like to make things better. I like opportunity, and I found that right off the bat. And I think like all the kidding aside about what insurance can be, we're here for a really important reason. You know, we talk about putting people's lives back together, and you mentioned my stint in claims. So like, yeah, I had to do that, and my team had to do that. But even before that, and I think especially for agents, is like, you're the reason why people can pursue their dreams, right? Because they can buy that house without worrying like, well, what if I lose it all? And I've got nothing because all my assets are tied up in this, hopefully not money pit. Right. I want to build that business, but what if I get sued? What if, our fleet of cars gets flooded or whatever? You're the reason why people can go after what they care about. And that's a pretty big purpose. So I've just had a career kind of being able to help with that mission in different functions, different carriers, been, different geographies in the US and abroad. And eventually got to a place where I felt like I could help the company I work for. And that's been what I've been doing for the most part, except for my time as a management consultant. But I kind of want to help more broadly than that. And so I left the startup I was with. I still work with them as an advisor, but I left as an employee to help other startups trying to help the industry do better, to help insurers who are trying to kind of change and get out of that mud we all feel stuck in this industry. And, I've also been talking to a lot of folks in the agent and broker community. That's the first thing I heard on my first day was, did you hear about this internet thing? Agents and brokers, that's how long ago it was. It was this internet thing, not just the internet. Right? But I've never, that's never sat well with me. Obviously, it's not proven to be the case. And I still think it isn't. I think the channel, it will change. It has changed. We've all changed how we work and everything. So I don't think it's going to be stagnant. I think it's fluid. But I don't think it's dying. And so I've been engaging more and more with folks in the agent and broker community, just kind of helping them think about, how do we navigate all this? And that's how I spend my days. So that's, nothing too specific, but that's kind of what I'm about, is just helping the industry push forward because it matters, that core purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of our core values at Southern States Insurance is grow or die. Right. And we're talking about, New England, and I went to Boston College. You went to Bowdoin College. Did I pronounce it right?
You did. Yeah.
Right. And one of the motto of BC is ever to excel. So it's kind of similar to what you're talking about, always pushing forward. Right.
Yeah.
So in that vein, let's talk about embracing disruption, because, if you're going to push forward, you have to disrupt things. We've seen a lot of that, obviously, with, I think when people hear at least when I hear the term disruption, the first thing that comes to mind is Uber. And a lot of people compare,
Yeah.
Uber, it's the Uber of this, or, whatever. So
Right.
tell us about embracing disruption in the insurance industry, why that's important, and what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we can dig into the Uber example a little bit to
Yeah.
see some analogs. So, um, rewind before ride sharing and the apps and paying through that and everything. You get in a cab. A lot of them would have credit card. I went to New York City a lot for work. So like you get in,
Yeah.
there's a credit card machine there. I don't generally have cash or much cash on me. And people who haven't been in New York, like the cabs are really expensive generally,
Yeah.
unless you're going a few blocks. But like to get in from the airport, $40 plus easily.
Wow.
Depending what route they take, whatever, like it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Anyone from New York is listening, like, what an idiot. He has no clue, like he took the wrong route, but it's a lot, right? Like it, that can wipe you out if you didn't plan ahead.
Yeah.
And so I, like pull out my corporate card because I'm there on a work trip, and you hear from them, oh, the credit card reader doesn't work. Like every single cab in New York, the credit card machine's broken. And it's just stuff like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're taking me on a shady route. I don't like, oh, you're saying, oh, there's all these extras now. And like, just that feeling, that's not a great customer experience. So
No.
of course, when something like Uber comes along, it eats their lunch. The costs are better. It's really transparency and ease of transaction. Even if it costs more, I don't even think about it because it's like, it just happens through the app.
Yeah.
I don't need to have cash. I don't need to worry about the credit card or any of that. I have everything there. If I forgot to get a receipt, I don't need to worry because it's right there in the app, and I can get that for reimbursement through work or for your taxes if you're a solopreneur. It's just easy.
Sure.
I feel like if the cab industry, the livery industry, had recognized the pain points in that customer experience, it would have made them so much less vulnerable to disruption from Uber. And they tried, and there's a number of apps for hailing cabs that came out, and now the credit card readers work and all that, but it's too little too late.
Yeah.
And there is a cost differential because their unit economics with the medallions, it's messed up. Think about our industry. So what is it in the way that we work? I have a fax machine over there. And that's because I work with folks in insurance. Yeah. Well, so it was like built into my
Is it plugged in?
Scanner printer. It's not a standalone with like the curled paper kind of thing, but I use it. I don't use it often, but I do have to use it from time to time.
Yeah.
Because it's like us accountants and doctors' offices. And I think that's it. Or like the whole reason why the fax industry still exists.
Yeah. So our medallion is the fax machine.
Our medallion's the face. Luckily it's cheaper, but for anyone who grew up in the 80s, if you ever had a fax machine in the house, the screen's like, don't answer it. It's a fax. It's
yeah.
It's just what a painful existence.
I remember specifically, sorry to interrupt, but when I was at BC, I lived in an apartment, and one year I had a roommate who his family was from, I can't remember, somewhere in South America, but they were trying to fax him something that he needed for class or whatever. And I just remember him running around going, "Es un fax, es un fax." And just like, hang up the phone. I'm trying to fax something to you.
Yeah.
I can
It's
still
like when
hear
people would try to get on the internet when you were connected and they hear the squealing and screeching.
Oh, that was the worst. Yeah.
There's all kinds of things like that, and I think a lot of us in the pandemic suddenly realized, oh, we got to change.
Yeah.
But like InsurTech Connect, the conference started in 2016. So it didn't all start in March of 2020. Things have been brewing, and so we need to ask ourselves, where in all the ways that we work, in all the things that we do, have we created the problems? The mortgage industry is in the same boat, and a lot of them changed in the pandemic because you could not close a mortgage anymore when you forced everything to be in person. But Quicken Loans was already doing everything remotely, and they blew up. I mean, that company's huge in the mortgage scene now.
Yeah.
And that's a genuine multi-billion-dollar competitor to the likes of Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase and all, and a lot of that, it's not really on the rates because the rates are sort of market dictated. It's on the process. It's on the simplicity. It's on the ease of getting approved. It's all that stuff. So ask yourselves, are you sitting against the changes that are going on and against, more than the changes, the reasons why people seek those changes? Or are you saying, look, this is different. This isn't how we do it. I need to dig in.
Yeah.
So I see disruption as like this opportunity. That's the signal for where maybe you should think, okay, instead of laughing this off or thinking it's a flash in the pan or just being uncomfortable with it, what can I take from it? And even if it goes away, like not every disruptive tech or company is going to succeed. I mean, ask yourselves, for those of us who are around in like 99, 2000, how many of those .coms are still here today? It'd be
Yeah.
pretty hard. Like Google didn't exist yet. I was
Right.
searching for things on Alta Vista, which doesn't
Yeah.
exist anymore.
AOL.
Yahoo's kind of gone. AOL, right? Like it's
Yeah.
sort of Amazon, and then you'd be kind of hard pressed to name another consumer-facing brand that's
Yeah.
meaningful today.
It's a good point.
So I don't care what doesn't make it,
Mm-hmm.
but you could still take something even if they fail. Like don't forget when the original iPod and iTunes Music Store came out, there was also Zune and Rhapsody.
Yeah.
And Steve Jobs was like, who wants to subscribe to your music? You want to own it. And
Yeah.
that's
Everybody's
what the world
stealing
said.
it
It's
on
like,
Napster anyway, right?
right. Like I'm going to steal it or I'm going to buy it, but I'm not going to subscribe to it.
Yeah.
And the reality is today, most music is through subscription. It's actually pretty hard to buy songs digitally or physically, if you can even find someone selling physical music. It's, a lot had to change for that model to make sense.
Yeah.
But if we wrote it off just in like, the late 2000s, we would have missed the shifts that happened if we permanently wrote it off. And you just have to be open to these things and say, well, what can I learn? What can I take? And are there lessons for me that, they didn't have all of these resources and they failed, but I do.
Yeah.
You're a legacy insurer or a legacy agency or what have you. You have a lot of things those startups don't have. Just because they have a clean sheet doesn't mean they get all the benefits. So I say just keep your mind open to these disruptive points and see what could be an opportunity for you rather than, ending up going the way of the taxi cab.
Yeah, it's funny you were talking about like music as an example before the other day. I think it was yesterday. I asked Siri. I had stuff in my hands. I was asked Siri to like play something by Louis Armstrong or something like that, and it pulled up like iTunes, like the store. I didn't even know that still existed, and it was showing prices. I was like, no. I wanted to stream it. We've become so conditioned to changes like that, right? So I'm wondering, from an agent's perspective, our audience, agents and agency owners, like what are some disruptive companies or technologies that they should otherwise be paying attention to? Or, I started reading your second book on the future of insurance, and already first chapter was talking about Neptune. That was one I'm going to be candid with our audience. I've been so focused on getting our agency kind of moving in the direction that we wanted to from a cultural and organizational standpoint. I have not been paying as close of attention as I needed to have been from a disruptive technology standpoint, all the startups and InsurTech. And you and I were talking about that beforehand. So for somebody like me, who might not have been paying as close attention, what should we be paying attention to?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great example because I think there's sort of two sides to the startup, the disruptive tech, the innovation coin. One is on the enablement, and there are a ton of things out there that can make your work easier, your lives easier, your team more engaged because things are easier for them, or it can make that customer experience that much better. And some of it may seem like a no-brainer, like, oh yeah, that's, we've been in so much pain dealing with this. This is a better way of doing it. Others may feel really uncomfortable. And we had those kinds of moments, certainly the early days of the pandemic, where we couldn't work the natural way we always had. And there's lots of, whether it's communication tools or portals or e-signing, like whatever, there's lots of enabling technology out there. So that's the one side. And I think those feel more obvious. The other is, as you mentioned, Neptune, there are these startup insurers, and I use the term loosely, and I know I get into this in the book, but some are technically not carriers, they're MGAs, and some are full stack carriers with their own capacity and paper. Doesn't really matter to you or the customer as long as they have a strong capital base behind them. Do you care? And the reality is the ones who are their own carriers, do they have the capital of a State Farm or an Allstate? No, but they've got some pretty strong reinsurers behind them, like Swiss Re and Munich Re and Score, and those folks aren't going anywhere. But when you think about what that means is you could see that as a threat. Neptune came out, they have a direct to consumer model. So if you're someone who sells flood, you might be scared of them, but they also sell a ton through agents, and they have a beautiful solution on the agency side. So if you just look at them as like, oh, they're writing direct, I'm not going to play with that. They're just going to disintermediate me. Well, what if you need to solve for a flood need for your customer?
Sure.
You send them to a process that is a lot more painful. And like you look at the National Flood Insurance Program, that's a multi-week process, a lot of uncertainty. You have to pay for the inspection, even if you don't know if you're going to get insured or not, or offered to get insured. And you certainly have no clue what the pricing is going to be. There are other tech savvy kind of solutions out there that are not that hard to do. But I'll tell you, like in researching for the book, I got quotes from a number of kind of the new generation of flood insurers or solutions. No question for me, Neptune was by far the best process.
Because it takes only a couple of minutes, right?
It's so much easier. It's a lot more natural.
Yeah.
Like me, I'm not a flood insurance guy, and I tried to take off any understanding I have of the dynamics of this stuff. And I had a flood about 11 years ago in my house. A water table rose in our town. It's not a floodplain or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I kind of parked my understanding of the space aside, and just try to answer it as a regular old homeowner. And it was so much better.
Yeah.
And it took, like Jim, the founder, kept telling me 2 minutes to get a quote. And off the record, he's like, so the reality is it's not 2 minutes. It's a lot faster. And I timed it. I think it was like 42 seconds, something like that. And the quote was
versus
much lower than
days, right?
Yeah, or weeks, right?
Yeah.
But even, those tech savvy ones, it's like 5 minutes. And that's the reality is like, that's not that bad. So it wasn't the time, but it was just so much nicer.
Yeah.
And you start to look around, and yes, there are some new kind of insurers who are direct to consumer, and that could be a threat to you as an agent. But there are others who, I was saying to you before, like a lot of these startups come out and they're like, oh, look at what these incumbents are paying their distribution. They're just blowing money. We're going to cut that out, go direct to consumer. And like immediately it will be 15, 20 points ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
And then they actually try to get customers, and they realize it's incredibly expensive and hard to acquire customers and to keep them. And the agent channel does do something of value. So maybe don't throw shade.
Yeah. It's all about relationships still.
Right. And people don't understand this stuff, and they do need help, and they do want help. And maybe not every customer, but there's plenty who do. And that's why the channel has endured. So there are a lot of solutions like Neptune who actually sell quite a bit through agents. There's Neptune, Next Insurance. If you're on the small commercial side, they're turning on agents now. They have been working with brokers, and they have a direct play. And the list goes on. Coterie, another small commercial focused MGA in this case, but they're very heavily focused on the agent channel, exclusively so. So the list goes on, and it may just be another market to you, but look into them, and some of them have some really nice solutions. The coverage could be better. The pricing could be better. It could be more flexible. It could be easier to understand. And let's face it, if their solution is easier for your insured to understand and see value in, that makes it so much easier for you to sell it and to stand by it, because you're not doing the lifting for that insurer who's just kind of difficult to work with, right? So there's a number of things that actually may make your life better as well. So I just say be open to these things and look at them, and don't be quick to swear it off just because it's new.
For agents who, hear this and it goes in one ear and out the other, 5-10 years from now, what's it going to look like for them?
Oh, I think that's a really interesting question for a few reasons, because I think a lot will change for the agents, and I think a lot's changing for the carriers. And 5 or 10 years might be too soon, but I think maybe 15 to 20, the landscape of who the carriers are could be different. And there's a number of reasons behind that. But I think if you have your market, you've got your niche, and you're okay with that, that's fine. But you need to ask yourself, are you in the business of being fine? Or do you want to create something and build something and grow and have something that endures? And ultimately, agents are salespeople. I don't think salespeople want to be fine. I don't think salespeople want to contract.
Right.
And
not good salespeople.
Our business is right. Our business is a stock business, and I don't mean like investing kind of stock. I mean, you have your population of clients and customers, and every year some will attrite, or go out of business, or die, or whatever, but that stock will get smaller if you're not adding to it. So to be in the mindset of complacency is fine. If it's just you and you're going to ride it out to retirement and you're content with that, okay. There's,
Yeah.
that's fine for some people, but I think for the majority of us, it isn't. And this is one of these moments. I say it's like, you're driving towards a cliff, and at some point, either that wheel's got to get turned or you're going to drive off the cliff. And for some people, they may be okay with driving off the cliff, and that's in their plan. And it's like, well, my kids don't want the business, whatever, like
Yeah.
that's fine. But for others, do you want to turn the wheel when you choose to and in the direction you want, or do you want someone else to turn it for you?
Yeah.
I would rather be in control of when that wheel gets turned and
Yeah.
where it gets turned to. So I think this is that sort of situation, is like complacency. Everyone has their preferences. I'm not going to judge you if that's really what you want, but if that doesn't feel right to you, this is the moment when you get to engage in it.
It makes a lot of sense. And basically what I hear you saying is, if you want to take control of your future, the future of insurance for your agency, your clients, their customer experience, which I think it sounds like a lot of these insurtech companies are focused on, is just creating a better experience, kind of what you were alluding to, the analogy of, the cab. Like, do we want the Uber experience, or do we want the cab experience? Where do we want our customers to feel like they're, on edge, like, why are you making me pay cash, kind of thing? That analogy, it sounds like you're saying, you have the opportunity right now to pay attention to what's going on in the marketplace and, see what works for you. And that's one thing we were talking about offline before, just check it out, see what fits for you. You don't have to use every single one of these companies. My God, there's thousands of these startups, right? Like that. And I guess that's another question. Like, how do people go about choosing what's going to work best for their agency when there are so many options out there for all these disruptive companies?
Well, so I think that's a really important question. And for me, when I'm looking at a startup, put aside like a legacy carrier, because every agent's had to make that decision: is, do I want to be an agent for this market or not? Or, am I going to turn them off? Are they going to turn me off, or whatever? Like we've made those decisions. I think we know how to do that in the incumbent world. But how do you evaluate the newbies? And I think for me, what I try to get this point across in the book is, it's the last thing anyone needs is another market. Right? We don't need just another auto insurer selling
mouth to
ISO.
feed.
Yeah, like that's just not interesting, and it's not necessary.
Right.
And to be fair, there are a number of insurtechs that are basically trading on, honestly, underpricing and cheeky marketing. Like the one who gets the most attention, that is their main differentiator, is they're just very good marketers. And I think that they've underpriced their product, which, if you look at their financial results, they have definitely underpriced the product. That's not, like, being cheap and clever is not a good enough reason to be insured by someone. And so, like, I wouldn't choose off of that just because they're there. Like, that's not a good enough reason. I think you need to look a little bit deeper and say, well, what does offering coverage from this insurer, what does building a relationship with this market mean for me? What are they going to do that what I have to offer today can't do? And you need to be really careful in how you answer that, because your comfort zone is going to lead you to an answer that may downplay some of the differences. And so you have to be pretty, I think, humble and honest about the differences in what they're offering, and not just write it off. But I would say maybe ask some of your customers. And this is a point I see coming up a lot, especially with, established agents, is the sort of flash in the pan response. Oh, I don't need that. My customers don't want that. My customers prefer to work this way. My customers, my insureds, my clients want to do things like this. Have you really asked them that? Or have they had an option where they could have chosen differently? Or have you always only offered one way of doing things across the 8 or 10 or 12 markets you represent in those lines of business? And so there really wasn't a way for them to vote differently with their wallet. They're all sort of interchangeable, but roughly the same experience. So for you to presume that no one wants that is flawed. And I also hear, like, well, because they all want what I'm doing now, I'm not going to waste my time with this new stuff. Well, yeah, some people might prefer to still, use the fax, come in, pay by cash. People who want to work a certain way still can. And that's something that I think we have trouble with is just because you turn on one or two markets or tools that are different doesn't mean everyone suddenly who wanted to work the old school way can't. You're still, offering coverage from these other carriers that you've always offered it from. You can still meet people. You can still collect cash. You can still talk to them when they have a claim. They don't have to go to the app. It's all these things are points of optionality.
Yeah.
And if we go back to the cab example, those cabbies say, oh, my customers don't want to pay by credit card. No, because you never let them. So how do you know whether they want to or not? And maybe if you offered them, suddenly they'd be, oh, actually, yeah, that would be great. I would prefer that.
Yeah.
We need to be a little bit more open. And I say, like, the reminder I give to everyone, carriers, agents, et cetera, is you are not the customer. You need to remember that.
Yeah.
The customer is the only customer here, the end customer. So when the agents, are speaking for customers, or when carriers are saying, well, the agents told us this, I'm like, you're both wrong. Let the customer speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And don't constrain them to the world of exactly what you do today.
Yeah.
I think that's really critical for us to open up and see new possibilities.
I love that, Bryan. And, have you read the book Ask by, I think it's like Ryan Levesque? I think he's
yeah, a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same concept, right? Like all you need to do is just ask questions. And I think we as independent agencies and independent agents are in a unique position because we interface with our clients much more than I think those on the direct writer side would.
Yep.
And we're in our local communities. We know these people. We see them at church. We see them at school and out at restaurants and things like that.
Yeah.
Asking them and being vulnerable enough to ask and be ready for what their answers are and not fight back against it is critical. So if our account executives are asking, just at the end of a call or naturally in the middle of a call, by the way, like, tell me your experience with this carrier, or tell me your experience with when I was able to provide you, your Neptune quote in a couple of minutes or 45 seconds, versus, waiting a few days or weeks. Like, how did that work out for you? What did you like? What did you not like? And that's actually a question we've learned to ask a lot in our agency. Even among our own staff, like we have quarterly conversations with every person. Like I get reviewed as well. I get a quarterly conversation to see how I'm doing. And the question is always what's working and what's not working. And I think if we were to ask those two questions of our clients on a more frequent basis, we'd probably be really surprised what we hear, but likely also start to uncover, I asked you before, like, hey, how do we make a decision which one to go with? Well, maybe that's the answer. We ask our clients what they're actually looking for, what they don't like about the process now, and then marry it up with one of these insurtech companies who could otherwise solve that pain point.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that framing. I think that's really critical. There's something else that agents have that really, like, a direct writer is never going to have is you can talk to the customer anytime, and you can play the role of caring advisor and guide, especially for a commercial insured or a long-time personal insured. Is, like, financial advisors don't just reach out to you when it's time to sell you a life insurance, hopefully, when it's time to sell you something, or
good financial advisors.
Right. Like, mine checks in with me, and invariably, like, I like him, so I will always make time for him. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
But when he reaches out, I'm like, I don't really have anything to talk to him about, but I always set the time anyway, because lo and behold, we use the half an hour he asked for and then some, because it's like, oh yeah, and then this, because we start talking about what's going on, and he asked me about life and about, how I'm feeling with these things, and he's like, you've got this thing with what you're saying now. I don't know if that's still a fit, but here's the downside to getting out of it. Like, let's talk through that. We have a meaningful and engaged conversation versus what do you talk to a direct writer for? You don't just call them, and they don't just call you to be like, yeah, just checking in, wondering how you're doing.
Yeah.
But an agent can do that. And actually, I think that's the key differentiator for the channel, is not to be the person who just sold you something for a fixed commission. It's the person who's by your side, and to really walk you through that and the issue of risk in your life more holistically. And that's frankly why someone puts their trust in a given agent and not the agent down the street or the website for the competitor, right? It's our relationship means something to me. That is now a material advantage over anyone who's, and I get, outreach from other financial advisors all the time,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I'm going to switch. But what if I didn't have a relationship? And the guy I'm with right now is not who I started with years ago.
Yeah.
I switched because that guy, A, wasn't delivering, but B, didn't seem to care.
Yeah.
And didn't understand my situation or take the time for it. And I only heard from him when he was forced to do his one annual end of year call to see if there's anything I should sell for tax reasons or whatever, or force me into an IRA. Like it wasn't actually a meaningful advisory relationship.
Yeah.
I think that's where a good agent gets to be an amazingly dependable and trusted resource that, I mean, who churns from that?
Yeah, absolutely. What's the saying? Like, people don't care what you know until well, I'm totally botching it. People don't care what you know until you care about them or something like that. I've completely botched it, but it was,
but I think that's spot on. And
yeah.
The thing that will make them churn despite all that is if there's so much other pain in it. It's like, well, I really like him or her, but it's costing me this, or it takes forever to get this done, or I reach out for something that I needed on the spot and I could have just gone to the website and gotten it right away.
Yeah.
These are those credit card and a taxi cab moments where we have to be a lot more vulnerable about where just because, but they love me. Yeah, they do. They just don't really like working with you because that's not the speed of their life. And by the way, that bar is going up because everything else in their life is, Netflix and Amazon and Uber and Airbnb, all the simplicity for everything else in their life, that gap gets even more visible to them.
Yeah.
So we do have to push. We do have to make ourselves better and be open to that flexibility so that our one major advantage, that relationship and our ability to deliver on engagement, doesn't get overshadowed by these other nuisances.
Yeah. I love it. Brilliant. Bryan, let's do some rapid fire. You ready?
Cool. Yeah.
All right. One piece of technology or software that you cannot live without.
So for me and what I do, it's something called Calendly, which I don't have an executive assistant anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I would possibly coordinate all of the different meetings going on. And that's for agents too, right? If you have 100 people you're trying to see over the course of the next month, you can't offer them up all of these time windows because each one of them is gonna, as they start booking in, you got a problem. So I'm just like, if you don't mind, here's a link.
Yeah.
You can see my calendar and find a time that's great for you. What a godsend that has been for me.
Yeah. That's essentially how you got here today, right? Like I asked you if you'd like to be on the show and then sent you a link. It wasn't Calendly. I use Calendly for Southern states, and then I use a different one for the show. It's
there's a bunch of them
Acuity.
out there. Calendly is Atlanta based.
Yep.
So you're helping your
I didn't know that, really?
Yeah. Started in Atlanta.
See, you got people like MailChimp and, who are all Atlanta folks. That's awesome. I totally agree. Calendly for sure is a big one. How about one book that you're either reading or that you would just highly recommend?
So there's a book on Buddhism that is, and I'm sure will remain, the best thing I've ever read.
Yeah.
It's called Open Heart, Clear Mind, and it's by this Buddhist monk named Thubten Chodron. But that's actually not the one I'm going to recommend. But I can't remember the author of this other one. But it's called NonViolent Communication, which is the second best book I've ever read. And the reason why I'd recommend it here, I think the Buddhism one actually could help tremendously. But if we're talking about a relationship business, being able to navigate when people are in a tough place and lashing out, being able to handle how you respond. Actually, it's Buddhism that is at the heart of, I'm not a Buddhist, but studying it, at the heart of my ability to do better in those moments. But this book, Nonviolent Communication in particular, I think could actually be really helpful to people in business, because you get tough calls, or you get people who are mad, or best case scenario, it's terrible for them. They've just gone through something really bad.
Yeah.
in a claim. And so they're reaching out to you at, a not good moment for them.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, they could just use some help in navigating that, even
Yeah.
if they're not inherently mad at you.
Yeah.
Right. Or they're like, this just happened and I know this is going to be terrible, this process, and the insurer is going to fight me. And so I'm on edge. Your ability to navigate that. So nonviolent communication or open heart, clear mind. I think both of those would be super valuable.
That's awesome. Cool. Thank you. And then one piece of advice for our listeners, just kind of wrapping things up.
Yeah. I mean, I just go right back to that disruption point is, disruption is a scary word. It's a bad word. But only if you fight it. If you at least take it as a call to look and listen, look within, ask your customers, engage in that discussion about what that disruptive thing is about. You might learn something.
Yeah.
And it's not going to knock you off your post if you're willing to play the game. So that's my take, is disruption is actually a big signal that there's an opportunity here. Want to do something about that? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it. That's a good mindset to have about it. Bryan, this has been awesome. When people want to find you out in the real world, out in the wild,
Yes.
What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So someone told me the other day that on LinkedIn, I'm ubiquitous, and I don't think they actually meant that nicely, but that's an easy way to find me. I'm at Bryan Fulchek there. But otherwise, they can go to insurance-evolution.com. That's my business. And you can also link to the Future of Insurance book series and everything from that site, and podcasts and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But I am kind of ubiquitous, so it should be easy enough to find. And it's just me, so I will respond. If you hear from me, it's me.
That's awesome, man. Bryan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. And I think our audience is going to get a lot out of it. I encourage all those who are listening to grow big or go home. Take care, guys.